Tonight's video in our Master Series. This is the 129th video, I do believe, in our Master Series, and the third video in our mastering phase. We're basically ready to get set up and do some mastering. So let's do a couple things before we actually get mastering. Hopefully, in the last couple videos that I made some really fine points to help you understand what's happening. A master engineer is supposed to be exactly that, a master of audio engineering and the principles thereof. So some of you may not be that, so we're going to try to put together, basically from my experience and my understanding of audio engineering, I keep concepts in my head about what I have to take into consideration and have some knowledge, but the basic process that I go through, I've tried to make as simple as possible to deal with the issues in a direct and simplified way. So hopefully that you will find it to be that way, but it may be a little time consuming until you get some experience doing it and get used to the workflow and really being able to hear what's going on and make good judgment calls and be able to fix issues as you run into them. But the process should still hold. It's just a matter of you getting better at it and you being a better engineer as you gain experience and wisdom and knowledge. So hopefully I've been trying to give that to you throughout this master series. So basically, when we get into this, we basically want to, we've got our mix finished out with about minus 3 dB of headroom. Now, I'm no more than minus 3 dB of headroom, even if I'm sending it to a different mastering engineer, so I don't lose lower decibel harmonic content, because the lower that is set, the more chance there is of losing lower decibel harmonic content, which I don't want to do. So about minus 3 dB of headroom. And then also, if you're doing it yourself, the processing we did in the last phase, don't worry about it too much. If you're sending it to somebody else, go light on your processing at the end. Don't be the mastering engineer if you're going to send it to a mastering engineer. Go light on that processing that we did in the last phase and let the mastering engineer have some headroom. So these are two types of headroom that a lot of people in the industry, when people talk about headroom, they don't really understand. There's a little bit of headroom here in, given, in decibel range, to give them a little bit of headroom to work with and not lose harmonic content, and to go light in that processing at that last phase that we did before we got into mastering here, to give the mastering engineer some headroom to do his mastering abilities, sweetening the mix. If you've already convoluted it with a bunch of processing and you're not a master engineer, then don't assume to be one. Does that make sense? Let him do his job. Don't put a bunch of processing on there and then send him something you process the crap out of, and you've got it pushing, with your maximizers and your limiters up at 0 dB, and you've processed the heck out of it and you've given him absolutely no headroom to do anything to your production. Those are the two of the biggest things you run into in the industry, to leave the mastering engineer some headroom to be the mastering engineer. Now, if you doing it yourself, then that sweetening is great. You're going to probably refine it a little bit when we get into mastering here, because when you convert to a single polar waveform or complex waveform from all those multitudes of files, that there's a whole lot of mathematics that happen and summing that can cause issues that you're going to have to deal with and re-sweeten things. So just don't worry about that. But that's a huge concept to get in your head if you're in the music industry and you're a mixing engineer or anything like that. So basically, you want to, after you've rechecked it and you're pretty happy with everything and you're good to go and you've taken those things into consideration, that you want to open up that original song file. You've got the original song file that we did the mix in, that's the original mix, and we've got that open. So you also want to open and create a new comparison session. And you want to create a bus to put all your analysis tools on, to run direct and to sidechain for comparison of your mix down against the master wave file we're going to create, and the comparison of the master wave file against any other formats you make that are going to be either lower decibel or lower sample rate and bit depth, or lossy formats like MP3, VOG, Orbis, or whatever. So, that's the next thing. So hopefully cross your fingers that my DAW doesn't crash because it did the last time I did this. Basically, you want to make a different session that is set up for comparison. So this session should be, set up pretty simply. You've got a place for your mix down. You've got a place to put your master wave file that you've done once you've made a master of the mix down. And you've got some other ones on here, like this is one's for a mastered MP3, mastered Valgormas, mastered, other wave file or AIF, whatever the heck all you plan on doing that you've set up tracks for them. And you've got an analysis track. And you've got that set up to where you can run direct into that, and you can also do side chaining into that. So basically you'd be running maybe your master directly into that bus, and then you'd be side chaining in maybe this MP3 so you can visualize a comparison of them besides listening to it. And so you want to have that bus set up for analysis, and that's a pretty simple deal. After that you basically want to create a new mastering project page. Now, we haven't made a mix down yet, so we basically did at the end of the last phase. But you'll find out if you get into mastering, you may redo that. So don't worry about that, because basically what I want you to do right now is just create whatever you're planning on mastering. And remember from the last video when I talked about it, that sometimes I'll take mix downs into a song file that's just a song file that I might do different work on different sections, because the different sections have their own needs, and sometimes my mastering suite won't do some of those things. But you have two places. So I might have two open. I have a song open that I can do work, that I can do automation on, and a lot of detailed work that my mastering suite may not be able to do. So, but I have two of them open. So in this next application for mastering, I'll have a separate song open, that's named mastering, and I'll have a project page open in my mastering suite. So I basically have 4 things open at the same time for doing adjustments, so that I can create a workflow from that. So that's a pretty simple concept. So once you've got all that open and you've named those files, accordingly to what you're going to be doing, we're going to actually go in here and we are going to start getting ready to go through this song, do a mix down, and then start reevaluating it and checking it and seeing what's happening with it. So the first thing that I do normally is, once that I've got to the point now that I'm happy with that song we talked about right up here, when we first got in there, we've rechecked it and we've talked about it and it's good to go, minus 3 dB, I'll do a mix down of it. Now I'll take that mix down and I will drag that into my mastering suite. So my mastering suite, whatever I'm using for mastering, I'll drag it in there. And then what I do is I get out a notebook and I start making notes about it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check the mix down for issues. So I'm going to check it for issues, anomalies, anything, make really good notes, listen to my headphones, my monitors, walk away, come back. I might do that 2 or 3 times and recheck my notes. Once I'm pretty happy that I've rechecked everything, then I'm going to go to checking the mix down for any needed improvements or reductions in processing. So stereo widening, equalization, reverberation, anything we talked about in the last phase when we were doing group processing. I will go down, I'll listen to it, walk away, make notes, come back, listen to it again, my headphones, my monitors, make notes, walk away, come back, with fresh ears, do it again, and I'll get a really good list up of what's going on. So basically I've done that, I've gone through it, and I've really made good notes about anomalies and improvements and reductions of my processing, what I might need to do. And I'm ready to go into the next step here. So now before we go into that, I want to address something. When we were doing our work throughout this master series, I didn't state a lot to use reference tracks because I really wanted you to trust your ears and what you thought might sound good and really practice. But it's a really good time now to bring this up, because at this point that I would recommend you put in a bunch of reference tracks into your song, somewhere in your song session that are and compare it. You will be amazed how big a tool is reference tracks. They are a big a tool as anything else you have as an audio engineer, just to listen to things. Compare what you're doing against what's going on. It's like, let's say you're doing something that's like top 40 or something, and you've got, like Rihanna up there, Beyonce and Whitney Houston, and you maybe 4 or 5 other people that are comparable, in that kind of pop environment, and you start comparing your stuff, your guitar, your bass, your drums, your snares, everything you're doing against theirs. Does that make sense? That might not mean you might not copy them, but from listening to theirs and listening to yours, it's going to help you start to fine tune what you're trying to do and go, no, I don't really like Beyonce's drum there, or guitar or whatever, and I don't like his the way that's at, and not Taylor Swift's that one there, but more, a little bit more like Beyonce's, but not exactly, and you start just fine tuning, getting your targeted in to what you want it to sound like. And I know that sounds funny, but they're huge tools, because those people, for the most part, I have to say that most of those people weren't idiots as far as in those productions. So whether or not you like their songs or not, that they probably weren't all a bunch of complete morons. So you using them to help fine tune your abilities and help be able to fine tune being able to do your processing and your mixing are huge tools. And now that you've gotten through my master series, I really suggest that you go back to your song that you've got done the processing and it was completed, we're going into mastering, and go through it with reference tracks. Put a bunch of reference tracks on there and check it against every instrument, against what they're doing, and put a bunch of reference tracks in there. When you first start doing that, you might spend loads of time doing that, but that's okay, because they're huge learning tools, because it causes you to start experimenting. Why doesn't my guitar sound like that, or my pad synth, or my snare? What's up with that? What do I do? Needs more bass end, more high end, it needs more, around where, all the stuff that you've been doing throughout this master series, it'll cause you to go back and reanalyze what you were doing, as if it's comparable to things that got you into music, that made you want to listen to music, that made you want to be an engineer and a producer and stuff like that, and it will really help you fine tune. And also, when you start getting in this mastering, they're huge tools. When you start doing a master wave file that, and you start producing, different formats, I really want you to, in that comparison song that we made up, that comparison session, to really spend a lot of time, especially when you're first starting out, until you're a master engineer, really comparing everything you're doing and listening to people, big name productions. Things that you're doing that are not really comparable to other people, because you might just be a musical genius, bro, and your stuff is just not comparable to nobody. I mean, it's just, it could be, bro, but, there's a better chance than not that you can make some comparisons. That your bass, is a prime example. You listen to your bass, and then you listen to the bass on 15 or 20 different reference tracks, and you're comparing it. How loud is it in the mix? How's it EQ'd? How's it processed? Is it dirty? Is it clean? Has it got reverb on or not? Is it centered? Is it panned out? Is it da 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 da? Everything we've talked about, in your mind, start comparing what everything you did to your bass in comparison to that, and 15, 20 different tracks from, big productions, that I've got a little bit of radio play. You know what I'm saying? And start comparison. That doesn't mean you're going to copy them. You might not in any way, shape, or form. But there's a better chance it will help you fine tune, because you'll say, no, I don't really like that one. And I like that one kind of, but not exactly like that one. After you go through 15, 20 different reference tracks or more, that you'll start fine tuning and targeting. Beep, 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 beep. And that's what I'm looking for. Ding, 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 ding. Off you go, and master audio engineer. So really keep that in mind, because that's hugely important. So with that all being said, we are basically set up and ready to start doing some mastering. So get ready, because in the next video, we are going to jump right into getting our mix down done and ready to start creating a mastering file. See you in the next video.